Today I'm speaking with Jamal Luke. Jamal, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely, Tim. Thanks for having me, man.
It's great to meet you. I don't know too much about you, so we're kind of going to get to know you together with the audience. Jamal lives in Ohio with his three kids, and he studied education at The Ohio State University, where he was a national football champion. That's awesome. I'd love to hear more about that here. And he was a teacher for several years. He's also now a motivational speaker, among other things. And I'll have some links beneath this video so you can go connect with him if you'd like to. But Jamal, being that I don't know too much about you, please tell us more and maybe some fun things too.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. Well, yeah, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. And, growing up, sports was a big part of my life. Started playing football at the age of 9. Had my dad raised me in football. My uncle played for Ohio State, played for the Green Bay Packers in the 70s. And so I
Wow.
just grew up around football. And I think the biggest thing for me was I grew up knowing that I could accomplish big things in football with, having my uncle had the success that he had. And so I knew it was possible for me. And so when I started playing football at the age of 9, that was the vision I had for my life, was to go play at Ohio State and then go play in the NFL. And I was very fortunate to be able to live out part of that dream. Coming out of high school, wasn't highly recruited. I was a wide receiver, and so my team in high school, my senior year, we threw the ball maybe 6 times a game. So I didn't get a lot of looks. I ended up going to a Division II school originally, Tiffin University, up in Northeast Ohio. Played there my freshman year, and then I transferred from there and walked on at Ohio State. So as a walk-on at that level, your odds of making the team are slim to none. I was fortunate that I was able to, out of a group of 10, there was 4 of us that made the team that they invited to walk on. And so I was one of those 4 and was very fortunate to be able to be a part of a national championship team my junior year there at Ohio State. Went on to letter my senior year. And so was able to really live out some pretty cool dreams athletically. Chased pro ball for a few years after that. Didn't end up panning out the way I wanted it to, but it landed me into teaching. And got my first, what I call, big boy job as a teacher and a coach at a Christian school in Central Ohio for a really well-known worldwide ministry, right in Canal, Winchester, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus. And I was there for about 6 years. And then I ended up leaving there. My position got eliminated, and I went into sales, and then eventually got into business for myself and speaking, and led me into what I do today currently.
That's like you're like a jack of all trades in some ways. You've done so much. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. I've had enough experiences, not anywhere near like yours, but I've done a few different jobs over the years, and it's nice to kind of feel like you've seen enough to know how to do this and do that and a few things for
Yeah.
yourself along the way.
Yeah,
Well,
no doubt.
well, we're so glad you're here. In terms of what we do here, we're just looking to hear people's stories, of course. We love to get to know people. And I'd love to kind of hear your journey from childhood on in terms of what it was like going to church and hearing about Jesus and sort of what that was like. And then we'll eventually, I'll jump in with some questions along the way.
Yeah, for sure. So we started as early as I can remember. I was in church. My dad was a deacon at the church. We were going to a Baptist church at the time. My mom was really active in that church as well. And so from my earliest memories, we were in church at least 3 days a week, every week, like clockwork. And my family, so it wasn't just my immediate family, but my family, my grandparents, my uncles, my aunts, everybody was, a Christian. So I learned very quickly that, and I think you learn this subconsciously, what you need to do to be accepted by your immediate group, your family. And so I learned very quickly, subconsciously, I believe, to be accepted, I needed to be the super Christian. I needed to be the best Christian, and that would gain me approval, with my family. And so for me, church wasn't, I think for a lot of people, at elementary age, church is kind of like you go because you have to. But for me, it was something that I took very, very seriously from the age when I first gave my life to Christ, which was, I think, 6 or 7 years old. I remember just being down in the basement at children's church, and they gave the altar call, and I didn't really fully know what I was doing, but I just felt like, oh, I'm supposed to go up and I want to go to heaven, this is something I need to do. And so, from that moment forward, like I took it very, very seriously. And, I remember, my dad would gather us around as a family. It was my older brother, myself, and then my younger sister. So we're talking probably, at least late 80s, early 90s. And at least once a month throughout my childhood, we would watch this movie from the 70s called A Thief in the Night. And so my dad was just really big on the end times and being rapture ready. And so that movie would absolutely literally scare the hell out of me. And, it just made me want to make sure I was right. And so I just took everything seriously. Like, my, even going through middle school, high school, where I had a lot of friends that were in church on the weekends, and then, come to school, they're cussing, they're, smoking weed, they're doing whatever. But for me, like, no, it was an actual lifestyle. And, middle school, high school, I was trying to win souls, so much so that, my last name's Luke. In high school, my nickname was Brother Luke, because everybody
Nice.
knew what I was about. And I just felt like, that's what the Bible said we're supposed to be doing. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to have sex, and I'm not going to drink. And, like I actually lived it. My senior year, the summer going into my senior year of high school, I started reading the Bible every morning, and I read it cover to cover between June going into my senior year. By the time my senior year ended, I had read the Bible cover to cover. Every morning I would get up, eat my bowl of cereal, read the Bible. And I made it through the whole Bible. And I just felt like that was, if I wanted to witness to people, I needed to know what was in there. And so I lived it like, that it was my life. I got to Ohio State. I'll start with Tiffin, my first school that I went to. Found out about Campus Crusade for Christ when I was at Tiffin University. I made sure I was a part of that. And then I got to Ohio State. I made sure I was a part of Campus Crusade for Christ, Athletes in Action. And my whole mission was to use my platform as an Ohio State football player to win souls for Jesus. And, being a college football athlete at the highest level, I never drank, didn't have sex, which was crazy, because I used to like piss girls off because I would like go to the brink of having sex, but I was so like scared that I would just like get up and leave, and then spend the next 3 days repenting and, going through that whole rigmarole. But that was my mission. Like I really lived this thing. And, it took up until, so I finished at Ohio State, and then, when I got married right out of college, about a year and a half after I had graduated, and, got my first job working at a Christian school for a worldwide ministry, and a ministry I grew up watching on TBN. And I just felt like, this is God's will for my life, and I'm living it. And I'll never forget my first week there at the school. This was kind of, you have those moments that start to, peel back the onion, the layers, so to speak. And this was probably one of the first that I can remember. My first week at the school, I remember one of the teachers there, one of my fellow co-teachers there, who had been there. She had been there maybe 10 years already at that point. And I remember her telling me, she said, and I was just telling her how I felt like God had brought me there, and I was so excited. And she was like, well, just be careful, because I'll tell you this, nobody leaves here happy. And
wow,
that stuck with me. I'm like, really? Like, this place? Like, this is like God himself is here. And she said, I just want you to keep that tucked away, because I don't want to see you get caught up and get tainted. And so that stuck with me. And then, I kind of kept doing my thing. And then,
can I ask, did you ever clarify with her what she meant, or why she thought that was happening?
Well, I found out. I found
Okay.
out because I experienced it, which we'll dive into here in a sec. But really, what kind of sped up my process or took me over the edge of starting to really walk away from Christianity was my divorce. I got divorced in 2011, and great friends to this day, just wasn't a right fit. But that was the first time in my life now I was on the other side of the Bible, so to speak, because how the Bible speaks about divorce. And that was kind of an eye-opening thought and realization for me, because it was like, well, I've done everything right my whole life by this book and by you, God. And how did I find myself here? And that was kind of the first thing that led me down to having questions and starting to look for answers for those questions, and then questioning those answers, so to speak.
Now, when you were in the dating phase, had you felt like you'd really prayed about it and had God's wisdom in the sense that he was opening that door?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. Prayed, fasted.
And you were both professing Christians at that time?
Both professing Christians. She was in Bible college. I was a teacher at the school, the Christian school. We didn't have sex, which that's a whole nother topic. But yeah. So we did everything right. We both felt good. But we got into it, and we just, marriage wise, we just wanted completely different things out of life. Weren't compatible sexually. It just wasn't a fit at all. And I could have stayed in it because that was the right thing to do, or I could honor myself and honor what I felt in my heart was the right thing to do. And that's what I did. That was the first time in my life that I ever honored me against what the Bible taught.
Can I ask, what was the response from like your parents and your spiritual leaders?
Oh, they definitely were not happy. It was a disappointment, and that was the first time I experienced being, kind of disappointing the immediate, community that you want to be accepted and approved by, which is your family. That was really the first time that I was on the other side of their approval. And, it was challenging, to say the least.
Did it ever get so intense, like where they were threatening church discipline or anything like that?
No, that didn't happen. I never experienced that, thankfully. But it was more so just the constant, comments and, make sure you're living right type deal.
Yeah. It's interesting. If I could add a quick anecdote that stuck with me many years. I remember there was a couple at the church I went to for most of my life, and right outside of Philadelphia. And this couple had a lovely family. They had 3 kids, and they were getting a divorce for probably some similar reasons. And I remember hearing through the grapevine, I don't know how the grapevine works, that such intimate details get out, but something came to my attention where the pastor had warned them, like, God will get you for this. If you don't do it God's way, he will get you back. You can't fool God. God can't be deceived. What's that verse in James? Whatever a man sows, that will also reap. And this pastor kind of gave him a very ominous warning. And wouldn't you know it, like 2-3 years later, their little girl, who was like 7 or 8 years old, she was over with another girl, like at a sleepover, and there was a house fire, and she died.
Oh my!
And
goodness.
It was like, oh my goodness! Like, you just imagine the pain that those parents went through. I don't know where they are with Christianity at this point, but if they were still Christians, that thought of like, see, right. God's going to get you back. It actually cost you your daughter's life because of your selfishness.
Right.
It's amazing the pressure that system puts on divorce. And I know in my family of origin, there was like a couple divorces a couple generations ago, and it became like an anathema. Like guys, we got to break this generational curse. No divorce. It just can't happen. And it's crazy that they put such things on people when, your marriage can be so abusive and toxic that you feel like you're just dying inside every day.
Right.
It's like, stick with it. God will reward you.
Yep. Terrible. It's terrible. And I learned that if you honor, and this has been a process, honestly, Tim, because I think, the baseline of Christianity is you're bad. Like you in and of itself, you're a bad person. It's only because of Jesus that you're accepted by God. But so you're subconsciously, your baseline is you can't trust yourself. You're bad. Whatever your heart is telling you is deceitful. There's scripture about that. And so I've had to learn over these years that, when I actually honor my heart, like things actually work out pretty good for me. And that's been probably one of the biggest things I've learned over the last several years is that like, you're actually okay as you are. You're solid.
Yeah. It's amazing with those verses like Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, don't trust in your own understanding and all that. You get the sense that like, you shouldn't trust your own gut and instinct, as well as the idea that in the New Testament that, you need to put yourself to death, crucify yourself with its desires. And yeah, once you get enough gumption to know yourself and also to have a little self-compassion, it changes everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I just go back before? I know we're right at a pivot point of where you're getting into the deconversion. I just want to set a few pieces of the earlier part of the story in place. You mentioned being saved. Did you feel like when you were at the point where you're sort of growing in your relationship with the Lord and with the church, did you feel like there were times where you were sensing his presence where you would have said, either I heard his voice audibly, or I just sense his presence or the Spirit's presence, or I sense that he's opening up doors. I pray and he clearly gives peace or answers. Like, what was it like in the sense of the intimacy of just, it's not just a religion, it's a relationship, and I'm not playing a game and just wearing a mask. This is not a facade. This is real. Like, I really believe it. And I really believe that God is my Savior and my Lord, and my life belongs to him. And I will do whatever I can to listen to him, to love him, to fall in love with him more every day, to thank him for what he did through Jesus. And this is real. Like my focus is on the kingdom and the heaven. And I can't wait to see my king face to face someday. But for now, while I'm on this earth, I belong to Jesus and my life is wrapped up in him. What were those intimate moments like, especially with public worship and private worship and prayer? Just, what was your devotional life like?
Oh man, Tim, I was a worshiper, man. Like, it started really for me in 7th grade. I went to a church camp. There was this pastor from Indiana, I believe, came to our church camp and had us. The whole focus was on music and secular music, and had us turn in all of our secular CDs. And that was probably the first time that I remember really what I thought felt God's presence at that church camp. And I found out really why I believed what I believed. And I was hardcore from that moment until the day the math stopped mathing. And so, worship every morning, I would turn on worship music and have quiet time before school, starting in middle school. I did that. At church, I was always the one in youth group, not scared to raise hands and weep and get on my knees. Like, this is what God requires. I'm going to worship him. And oftentimes in those, I could, what I thought, feel God's presence in worship. And so like quiet time, worship, that was my daily routine. That started in middle school and that went all the way through college, and oftentimes felt like it dictated how the rest of my day was going to go based on how intimate of a time of worship or devotion I had that morning.
Yeah, I had the same dynamic both in my own head and just conversations with people all the time, especially at Bible college. Like, if you didn't have a good week, everyone's like, "We know why." Like, we know why you're struggling because you're not in the Word.
Yeah,
the Word is powerful. It'll change your life and it'll change your day. In terms of the desire to share the gospel, how often did you get a chance to talk to other people? And what was your experience like with either local missions, right there in your home or your state or whatever, or overseas? Like, did you do anything ministry and missions wise?
Yeah, absolutely. That really ramped up once I got into college at Ohio State. So, and going back to real quick, going back to how that dictated our weeks and our days based on our worship, like just the trauma that alone causes is absolutely ridiculous. It's insane. As a matter of fact, literally insane. I know for a fact I would have had a much better football career had I not been a Christian. Because my practices were dictated on whether I felt I was in right standing with God. So half the time I'm going out to practice, tripping about messing around with a girl last night, didn't have sex, but I knew I went too far. And so now I'm going out to practice the next day and I'm dropping passes because my mind isn't right. I'm like, not in right standing with God. And then that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then I drop a pass and like, oh, well, it's because I messed up. This is my punishment. And so just living in living in that constant unstable mindset, it affects every part of your life.
I was going to say real quick before we answer the other question, I had the same thing, and I feel like that guilt trip that just you get used to it. You don't really think of it as God abusing you or in any way some kind of trauma. You just think of this is how God pulls you back. This is the Spirit convicting you. But yeah, when you look at the dynamics of mental health and you think about what is it like for example, a child to live under long-term trauma or long-term fears of like, something's going to get me. Like you can see how it literally directs a child's personality in their whole life.
Absolutely.
And I think the hard part for me and a lot of other people that I knew over the years, especially Bible college, was when you are professing very proudly your relationship with Christ, and especially when you're getting into missions and ministry kind of stuff, you have to have a good face. You have to have a game face of like, I am a leader and I take this seriously. Yep. And when you do have those moments behind the scenes where you've fallen, whether it's, significantly or just, kind of a smaller deal, but between you and God, God from our theology didn't see a difference. If you, even like Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, if you've lusted after a woman, it's like you've committed adultery.
Absolutely.
You're guilty. And so, you deal with this constant thing of the King of the universe is looking and he can see inside my head and my thoughts.
Right.
And he's saying, I'm so disappointed in you. I'm so disappointed. Like, you know better. And also the thing that would get me a lot was this is what put Christ on the goddamn cross.
Right.
Like you're literally like pounding new, fresh nails into his body by doing this. Like what part of this cost Christ his life don't you get? Yeah. Why are you playing with fire as if your Lord and Savior didn't just, shed his blood for you to get you out of this sin?
Right.
And just once you start trying to say, I'm really sensitive to the Spirit, I'm really sensitive to sin, and my life belongs to God, and then you mess up, you feel like, wow, I guess I am a hypocrite. I guess I don't belong up on stage anymore.
Yep. The pressure. I mean, it's pressure, constant pressure. I mentioned it on Brady's podcast that I did with him several months ago. I was saved, but I never felt safe. It was a constant state of pressure of trying to appease this God and not doing it well enough. And you can't tell me it didn't come from my own head. No, it actually came from the Bible I was reading. That's the thing. I think a lot of people, because it's so fear-based and because it's so trauma ridden with this boogeyman, there's so many people that talk themselves into that they're a Christian because they know if I put that title on me, that means I can, in my head, feel like I'm going to heaven. But they don't actually live what the Bible is saying. They're still having sex outside of marriage with multiple people. They're still getting drunk. They're still and however literal you want to take it. If you want to get literal with the Old Testament, they're still cutting the sides of their heads. They're not actually living the Bible, but they'll call themselves a Christian because it makes them feel okay. But no, if you actually live the Bible, you're a schizophrenic mess because you're going to be constantly feeling, am I okay? Did I do good enough? Oh, I didn't do good enough. Oh, he's upset. Oh, now he's pleased with me. Oh, so I remember crazy.
There's a verse that says, if I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. Yeah. And I remember thinking to myself when I first read it as a kid, like, does that mean like God sort of is choosing to not answer my prayers or that he literally can't hear me? Like,
Right.
am I
Right.
literally putting myself in that bad of a spot where I could be, a near death experience and like I'm begging God save me,
Yeah. He's up there with earmuffs.
yeah, like he can't hear me. And
Yeah.
it does, it gets to you. But I think it also brings out what you're saying, brings out the reality that I didn't reflect on until much later, but it's like, where's the power of the gospel? It's the power, this dunamis, dynamite power that can change your life.
Mm-hmm.
And yet so many of us were like, I'm not victorious over sin, supposedly, that exists. But, I'm not victorious over it. Your yoke is supposed to be easy and your burden's supposed to be light. Doesn't feel that way to me.
Right.
And I can play a bunch of mind tricks and jump through hoops, but if I'm really honest, this is a hard journey, and I feel like I never really, make the cut.
Right.
And it ends up feeling like, where's the power of the gospel to just make you absolutely radiant? And I know that there was always that theology like, you'll be glorified in heaven. Yeah, but the gospel power is here too. Like,
right.
I remember I had some family members even that they would have Christian radio on all the time. They're listening to 4, 5, 6 sermons a day, and all kinds of hymns in the car and this, there, everywhere. And it's just like, you have the Bible like in your veins, in your head, and you are some of the most selfish, grumpy people on the planet. Like, what the hell? Where is the power?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, I digress, but I do still want to hear about your missions and ministry heart and what came out there in that part of your life.
Yeah. So that really ramped up when I was at Ohio State, being a part of Athletes in Action. I was on the leadership team, for one of the Campus Crusade ministries, a ministry called Impact. So I was on the leadership team there. We had, led Bible study every week. And we would go out and witness, on campus, at a lot of parties. We would go hand out tracts and witness. I would always listen to my cross movement before I would go out and do that, get myself amped up and, go out and share the gospel. And then with Athletes in Action, we would go into schools and do different things. And then also I did a missions trip with Athletes in Action where, we went to New York City one year and, did some stuff in Harlem and Brooklyn up there. And then we went out to Colorado Springs and, did a missions trip with Athletes in Action. So, that was my focus when I was at Ohio State. It was to literally use that platform as an Ohio State athlete to help win souls for Jesus.
It's amazing. Once you get to that point, I think too, you get a little bit of a taste of an arrogance of like, I am actually shaking the kingdom here. Like, I'm making some strides.
Oh yeah.
I've got a little power, even if I'm not up on stage all the time. Like, I've got some power. And you begin to feel like, between your theological knowledge and now your ministry work and missions work, that you're actually like, you're past like the recruiting stage, like you're in the ranks.
Yeah.
And it gets in your head, and you kind of feel a little bit like, I'm head and shoulders above everybody else. Because, God's saying, who will go for us? And you're like shouting, here, my Lord, send me.
Right.
I'm not aiming for the white picket fence and the dogs and the happy life. I'm aiming to give my life and be spent for you. I'm willing to give my life away for you. And it's amazing what that does, especially when you live in a culture where, especially young men, if you shine, like really consistently shine, everyone's like, we know where this is going. That's either one of the pastors or missionaries in the next 5 years. We got to keep that guy on the straight and narrow, and train him and get him mentored and build it up so that when the time comes, he's ready to take the mantle. And that gets in your head a little bit, way too much. Your head gets way too big. And I remember shuddering at the idea that, like, what the hell are 25-year-old men doing preaching to 65-year-old couples? Like,
right.
25-year-old, like, you might not even be married yet or have kids yet. And you're going to have to preach a sermon up to people that have done it all about how to raise kids in a God-honoring way. And you haven't even started yet. I'm like,
exactly. Yeah.
The arrogance is outstanding.
Yeah. No doubt. No doubt. And that was supposed to be me. I was supposed to be, everybody in my family thought I was going to be a pastor. I used to always say, even as a kid, I would always lead the family prayers. And so that was supposed to be, in everybody else's eyes, the route I was going to end up on, being a pastor somewhere. And I thought that, even at college, leading a Bible study, I thought that was what I was going to do. And, and I feel like even to this day, I mean, I still do it, just it's a different it's a different lane I'm in, but I know that I'm still, impacting people and helping people be the highest version of themselves has always been my mission. It's just now I can do it with freedom in a lane that isn't trauma ridden.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you mentioned before your divorce, were there theological differences and things like that were coming in? Like, was there anything that was specifically, what I mean is, was there anything about the divorce process and journey that was making you question Christianity? Or was it just that the fact that you had a divorce was making you question it?
Yeah, no, it was just the fact that I had a divorce that was making me question it. Yeah, because like I said, it was like I had done everything right. My wife and I, we didn't have any theological differences. We did initially when we met, because the church she was going to and the church I was going to, were kind of different philosophies, but she ended up coming to my side and, we were fine, theologically. But, once that divorce happened, it was like, okay, now I'm on the wrong side. What happened?
Now, was your faith the kind at that point where you would have said, God, what happened, but I trust you through this? Or were you starting to actually question like the real identity of God at that point?
No, so I was starting to question the whole thing at that point. Like, being what the Bible said about divorce, and knowing how I was feeling inside that this wasn't for me, it was such diametrically opposed that it made me question everything that I had ever believed at that point. And that's when I kind of started to go down the road of really, searching for answers for those questions.
Hmm. What were some of the avenues you went down in your search?
The first big one was just how how did the Bible come together? Like, because I followed it and it didn't work for me now. And I was basing that all off my marriage not working. Like, my marriage didn't work, and I know I'm supposed to stay married, but I cannot do it. I don't feel it. So why don't I feel it, God? And I worship you and I trust you. So if I'm not feeling it, what happened here? So it just made me start to question the Bible. So then what I did from there is I started, kind of just researching, how did the books of the Bible come together? Um, I had another friend of mine, that turned me on to, Carlton Pearson at that point in time. Now I grew up, now he's, and God, at that time, um, he was huge for my life. That I would say 2000 to 11, really up until the time he passed, he was huge for my life because I had grew up watching him on TBN. We used to watch him like every week. And so I, I kind of lost touch. I didn't know where he was at in 2011 at that time frame, but I had a friend of mine at that time recommend me his book, The Gospel of Inclusion. And when I read that book about his, basically him turning from traditional Christianity, that was a huge eye opener for me because of where I was at, what I was questioning. And that just like lifted so many chains from my life. Like, man, all the questions I have up inside of me, like he had the same questions, and he actually, um, had some answers for those questions. And he actually got to see behind the curtain being the level of ministry he was at. So, I was even questioning the place I was working at the time. So all this like came to a head. It was about 2011. That was a pivotal year. So that was my divorce. I got turned on to that book. And at the time I was back working at the school. So my position got cut. I left and I came back for one more year to substitute teach there. And I just started seeing things in the school from the church side, the way this worldwide minister that everybody knows, if I say the name, that still comes on TV, how he treated people like shit, and how his staff treated people like shit. And the only focus for them was how good, you know, people could make them look, how good the athletic program was, so it could make them look good. But there was no Jesus anywhere. In the way that they interacted on an everyday basis with people and a heart for people. And so, reading that Gospel of Inclusion book, there was a line in there, that Carlton said where he said, basically he said there was a lot of worldwide ministers that you know of that don't believe hell is real and they don't believe the Bible literally, but they won't tell you that publicly because their business will crumble.
Yep.
And when he said that, I'm like, I see it every day at this school, at this church. And so at that point, that's when I kind of started like, yeah, I'm out on this Christian thing. I don't know what's real, but this like Bible, literal word of God, like, nah, that's not it anymore. It doesn't make sense. Like, and then I started studying hell and the concept and when hell actually was introduced into Christianity. And I just started thinking more. I'm like, okay, I've got three kids. Is there anything that they could possibly do? Anything that they could possibly do, Tim, where I would actually banish them to burn forever? And they didn't have a choice to be here. I created them. Like, how sadistic is that? Yeah, so I started realizing that a lot of the stuff I was doing as a Christian was to please this God so I wouldn't go to hell. But I really wasn't living from a place of authenticity. Like what felt good to Jamal, what felt in alignment with who I am and who I desire to show up as in the world. And so in that time frame, like I said, that's when I made the decision privately that I no longer believe this. Now, I didn't have the courage at that point to be vocal with it to my family because I still wanted to be accepted. And so I played the fence. I still went to church. And actually still went to church all the way up until maybe a year and a half ago. I wouldn't go every Sunday. I would go occasionally. And I called myself really doing it, to give my kids a foundation. But the reality was, I think there was a part of me that still was doing it to be accepted by my mom, or my brother. And so that once I got to a place of, I don't care what anybody thinks anymore, this is my truth, that was the next level of freedom out of the chains of Christianity for me.
When you got to a point, even when you were just still keeping it to yourself, but making that decision, what were some of the hardest parts of it in terms of what you thought was real and now wasn't, in terms of, God's just being there, and what were your expectations of the afterlife, and just all the whole 9 yards of, God's going to take care of you. He's got a plan and a purpose. And, this is, you're always ultimately safe because, he's got you, or his guardian angels have you. What were some of those things when it hit you like, okay, I'm connecting the dots here. That's not true. And that's not true. And that like the whole thing's just crumbling. Of those things that were crumbling, what were the things that hit you the hardest?
The hardest part was probably realizing that I had power. Like not putting my power and my hopes on this outside super male figure in the sky. Cause I had done that my whole life. And so whether I had success or whether I had failure, it was related to whatever he was in the mood for at that time. And so I think that was the toughest part was, and it's still a challenge to be honest with you, because it was so ingrained in me. I mean, we're talking 30 plus years of indoctrination. I still have to remind myself that I am successful. I am, I believe that there's laws to the universe that when I put those laws into practice, I have success. I don't put those laws into practice, I don't have success. When I give love to people, love comes back to me in abundance. When I give finances to people or away, it comes back in abundance. I believe those are universal laws. So if I want more of something, I give that thing away to get more of it. So I can literally manufacture my success. And so I have to remind myself of that I can control my future on this plane of existence. Because for so long I didn't control it. It was in the hands of this figure. And so I would say that was probably the toughest, or is the toughest thing to continue to accept and realize.
It's interesting. Did it hurt you at all to think about not going somewhere when you die, or where have you landed with that?
No, I'm at peace with not knowing that part. Like, and I think that was a challenge too, because for so long I always had the answers. So anything you were dealing with or questions you had, I could give you chapter, scripture, verse, book, everything where you could go find it. And, what is the key to get to heaven? I can give you that remedy. So now it's like, I'm just a student. I'm forever learning, growing, and evolving. And I'm okay with, in this moment, this is where I'm at. This is what I believe. That could change next week with new information that feels in alignment with me. And I'm okay with that. What happens after we leave this plane of existence? I believe something today, but that could change with new information. So I'm okay with just being a student and learning and growing, because whatever it is, it's going to be, whether I have the answer right now or not. Whatever happens after we leave here, it is what it is. But so I'm okay with that piece.
Gotcha. With your kids, what was the journey like? Because it sounds like, if I'm understanding the timeline correctly, that you were a professing Christian at a time when they would have been young enough to be also indoctrinated. Mm-hmm. So are they still Christians at this point?
Yeah. So I was still a Christian when my oldest was born and of age. So my oldest, she's 17 now. She's still a Christian. And so I've been married twice. And so my kids have different mothers, but the oldest is probably the hardest core Christian out of the two. So my 12-year-old and my 9-year-old, their moms are, I would say specifically my 9-year-old's mom. She goes to church and she still believes, but she's not like a hardcore like I was. My 12-year-old's mom, she does, she's more spiritual than Christian. So there's a balance there. So my 12-year-old and 9-year-old, they're not necessarily how I was at all. And we have talks about spiritual things, spiritual principles. And, my 17-year-old, now her mom is hardcore Christian. She was in Christian school for most of her life. So she's pretty hardcore Christian, but she has a lot more real world balance than I did. I was like 98% Christianity, 2% world relevant. She's got a good, I'd say 60-40 balance. And I like that for her. And we have open and honest conversations because she knows where daddy's at, spiritually and what I believe. And, she's seen a couple of interviews I've done. And so, and it's created great dialogue for us. And it's like I told her, and I'll tell, my 9 and 12-year-old as they get older, what I told her is, as long as that's working for you right now, baby, stay with it. Daddy's not telling you got to leave Christianity and, it's bullshit and all that. Like, you believe it right now, go for it. At any point when it stops working for you, I want you to know that you're okay to grow and evolve out of that box. So that's the conversations we have.
I love it. That's so cool. Such a beautiful gift to give kids, the gift of autonomy.
Yes.
And
yes.
To know that there's no threats from you.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, in a similar related note, maybe a bigger, harder question was, how did your parents take it?
So they still, and my dad recently passed a couple months ago. And he was just like, kind of, I want you to get back in church type deal. My mom is very, hardcore, I'm praying for you, the backhanded, um, I don't not backhanded compliment, but kind of backhanded way of guilt tripping. So my mom,
you'll come back to Jesus someday.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And my brother, who's a minister, associate minister at his church, him and his wife, they're the same way where they're just, I'm on their prayer list and all that stuff. So they're praying for me, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Hmm. Well, in terms of your journey at this point, I guess one of the big questions that always comes to my mind is just when you get to the level that you're at with it, where you've thought through it enough, you're not on the fence anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you don't believe that it's an accurate worldview anymore, and especially as you get the time to really kind of go past the initial deconversion to the point of sort of digging in and reconfirming, like, oh yeah, there's more reasons than I thought at first.
Yeah,
there was some good reasons at first, but now I'm like, okay, there's mythology woven into this thing, and
right,
you sort of get even more sure that this isn't going to be something you're ever going to entertain.
Right.
But one of the things that happens along that journey when you get to that point is you start to really think back at what you were going through and how it affected you over the years as you were in it before the deconstruction started. When you look at your journey, how is the healing going? And what do you feel like are some of the biggest lessons that you've taken away as sort of like a post-mortem to say, like, this has taught me a lot about just what humans in general tend to do, meaning, go for the stuff that's, going to be indoctrinated into your head and things that are going to make you feel like you're culturally acceptable to your family and your friends and your community. But like, as you look at all that stuff and all the dynamics, what are the things that pop out to you as like the lessons you're learning about humans and about your particular community and, your church and your family that help you to sort of say, you know what, I sort of have to go back and reparent myself. No offense to our parents. They did what they could, but you do at some point have to say, I kind of have to go back and tell the little boy at 5 years old, like, look, it's like doing a little bit of psychologizing for yourself. Like kind of going back and saying, like, look, let's have a heart to heart about this. Little 5-year-old Jamal, you need to know some things about the world, and let me kind of tell you about them. And if I know I'm kind of being science fictiony there, but if you could go back in time and tell yourself, you would have things to say to protect that little boy from the hurt. What are some of those lessons that are popping out at you at this point?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, Tim, because I actually did a rebirthing course for a while, and
wow,
that was pretty powerful because it literally took me back through the different stages of life. And one of the big things that came out of there is, and I had to deal with this, is I got like super pissed off. Like I was pissed off at Christianity. I was pissed off at my parents for even exposing me to it. I was pissed off at church. I was like, and so I had to deal with that because of the trauma that it caused and the healing I've had to do. And I've resigned to the fact that I'll be doing it for the rest of my life because there was so many hardcore decades. I mean, you're talking about 3 decades of my life where that was my worldview and I actually lived it. It wasn't just something I said. And so what I've had to do is just make a conscious effort really on a daily basis to, feed myself, whether it's through books or whether it's through podcasts or whether it's through audio, of just reminding myself of who I am, the divinity within myself, knowing that, and what I believe is I come from an almighty, all encompassing source, whatever title you want to put on that. But that source is me and I am that source and it's all around me. It's the air I breathe. It's the trees I touch. It's the ground I walk on. And so therefore I am powerful. And, that's the biggest thing that I want to relay to my kids. And the biggest thing that I have to keep teaching myself on a daily basis is that my power is not outside of me. And that was what Christianity, if I had to pinpoint one big trauma, it was that you in of yourself are not powerful. It's always outside of you. And so now I have to teach myself on a daily basis that no, Jamal, you're okay. Like, you are powerful as you are. And it's okay to know that, to realize that, and to walk in that. And that every person you come in contact with has that exact same power. They just need to be reminded of it. And that's part of the reason why I couldn't be silent anymore. It's about helping other people realize that you in and of yourself are powerful. Now you walk in it.
Beautiful stuff. I love it. I love how when you get to a certain point, like you really have to think through some of the ways that Christianity not just traumatized us, but also poisoned the well of good thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, at least, one of the big thoughts was the idea of self-love is very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
And part of this journey of having that power is really just seeing yourself so differently. It's sort of like, I know some of us use that funny cliche, we're born again,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like you're getting to know yourself for the first time. And you realize, like, I have never known who I am. And now I get to start over. And in some ways it's scary, but in some ways it's exciting because you're like, I get to decide who I'm going to be from this point on.
Absolutely.
And that power is real.
It is.
But there's a part of us that kind of cowers back over and over, like, wait a second, you're not supposed to trust yourself. And wait a second, what about this? And it takes a while. It takes a minute to get yourself back on your feet. But once you do,
mm-hmm.
and especially I think when you realize that you have the power first for yourself to remake your life, but also you have the power to help other people escape mythology-based worldviews. It's just like, holy smokes. Like I'm sort of on the culture change team now. I can change culture, like on big scales.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And it's a beautiful thing, but it is a journey. It's amazing how many times you find yourself saying to yourself, why did I do that? Oh yeah, I did that because I was in this stuff for so long.
And to speak to that power, Tim, just to give you an example, man, and cause I believe once you realize that you have that power and you start to honor that, the universe will literally conspire for ways for you to manifest that, to bring it out. Example, last Saturday when you reached out to me, I kid you not, about 4 hours before you reached out to me, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about my journey spiritually. And I was like, I want to do a podcast, just something, but I'm like, no, I don't know if I want to do a podcast because I don't know if I'd have weekly content, but I just feel like there's so much more inside of me that I need to get out. I don't know if I need therapy or what, but I just feel like there's more about my journey that I need to just get out and get off my chest. And then a couple hours later, I get that message from you about doing this. And it was just that reminder that, what we want, what we desire wants us. And it will be a way to manifest that will be made when we realize that fact.
Praise the Lord.
I know.
Amazing. Well, I am just so glad that you did escape. I was kind of curious. You're kind of hinting at it, but when I look at people who have powerful voices and understand that power well, I'm often inspired to think, like, I either assume you've already got a platform or I think you probably are going to start one soon. Like, what would be, based on your skills and your interests, like, what do you think would be the best way for you to be involved in helping other people who are sort of still going through the hardest parts of it?
Man, Tim, I don't have clarity around that piece of it yet. I know I want to help people. I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm open. Everything I do, I want to help people be the highest version of themselves. And so this for me is a way to help people reclaim their power. And I don't know exactly what that platform will look like, but I'm open for whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, if it does end up being YouTube or something like it, let me know. I'd love to have you back on when the time's right. We'll put it on blast.
For sure. Thank you.
I was curious. I just had a few final questions, and then if you want to start thinking about anything else that's on your heart to share today, but just going back to your story for a little bit, do you feel like you have ever had a chance to tell your loved ones about what you've learned in terms of the academics of where the Bible came from, as well as the mythology that it's based on and that's copied and woven into it? Do you think they have any idea Or do you think it's just like one of those la 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 la, I'm not listening to you kind of deals? How does it work?
Yeah, it's the latter. It's the la la la. And specifically where I would have that conversation would be with my brother. He's all into the scholastic things of the Bible. But even he can't hear it at this point where he's at. And so, they know where I'm at. They know where I stand, and they know my door's always open. If they ever have questions, they can come to me. But right now they're so entrenched in what they believe. And, I know how it was when I was like that. You couldn't tell me anything. And, so, we'll see what the future holds.
I mean, if I could harken this 1 second, if you were to tell him something like this, or ask him something, say, can I just take an hour or two, and can I tell you how the Jesus character is copied from the stories of Dionysius? Or can I tell you how the Jesus stories are directly copies of the Old Testament stories, where he's the new Moses, he's the new Joshua, he's the new Israel, he's the new Adam, etc.? Or can I show you how Homer's Odyssey and that grand story, of Odysseus' journey back home, that there's over and over and over and over and over and over and over. There's stories in that Odyssey that are copied right into the Gospels.
Right.
To the point of, it's like, you can't deny it. If you were to say something like that to them, would they be willing to at least have a conversation, or would they just be like, you're literally like, that's the devil talking. I'm not having that conversation. How do they handle
it? He would have a rebuttal from whatever research he's done, from his Christian author, and then have his scripture. Like, he's that entrenched, because we've started to go down that road before, and it's just it's a back and forth that just goes nowhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would fall on deaf ears at this point. So for me, my way of combating that, since I know we can't have the dialogue, is just to live a life. So to actually live the fullness of life, to live a life that shows, okay, they know I'm not under Jesus' wing anymore, and yet he's still prospering, or yet he's still fulfilled, or yet he still deals with life situations and he doesn't crumble. That's my way of still showing them, just basically living out loud, that, hey, over here, it's okay. Like, it's a pretty good life. It's a lot more free, and I'm not under the same bondage that you are. And then, maybe that at some point will be an eye opener for them. And if not, again, if it's working for them, hey, do what you do. But
I kind of agree. I definitely want people to do what they want to do, but unfortunately, most of them have an obligation to spread the poison. So,
oh yeah, they do.
I'm a little bit more militant about ending it in our world. But it's funny though that one of the things that's fascinating. I love how you answered that question, because it brings up the idea too that in some ways I think you could argue that on the surface level of living a good life, and I don't mean good in the sense of rich, but it's good in the sense of doing good things and loving people.
Yeah.
You could argue that a lot of atheists are more loving than Christians on a lot of levels. And I love how, like, when you grow up, you kind of thought about everything you did good for someone. I'm going to walk this little old lady across the street.
Right.
I'm going to pull over and help that guy change his tire.
Yep.
Like, all that stuff, you're thinking of it as like, number one, I got to serve because I love to honor God through it. But also, you never know which one of those opportunities is going to be somebody that's going to turn to you and say, you've got something different about you.
Right,
What's different about you?
And
well, let me tell you, it's Jesus Christ. And so everything was all about that. It was all about getting getting some way to get in that door to share the gospel.
Yeah.
And then when you realize that's all mythology, you ask yourself, well, am I still the same person? And you're like, absolutely. I want to help the little old lady across the street. I want to help anybody. I'll give anybody the shirt off my back. I am willing to bend over backwards in service and just to give my life to help other people in need.
Right.
Like, oh, so that wasn't connected to Jesus. That's just me, or that's just my family's culture. Like, like, I'm good, and I'm not good in the sense of like, oh, you're just doing good works. Like, no, I'm not doing good works to get to heaven. I like to help people.
Right.
So that's just, it's always been you. You walk in love. Yeah. It's always been you. It's never been God. Yeah. And that's, you can say about a lot of stuff. It's when you're praying, you're not talking to God, you're talking to yourself. It's always been
Exactly.
you. It's always been you.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
but you realize like, okay, so if I was a super, super loving, kind, generous Christian, now that I'm not, is that going to change because I don't have the motivation of honoring God or trying to get rewards in heaven? Like, no, it's exact same. I'm the same person. The integrity's there. I'm the same person all the way through.
Yeah.
And you realize like, wow, I still shine. And I think that's what's cool about it is you can say to people, not necessarily verbally, but you can say in your head is that my life is a beacon of light for people. I will take the people in tears and I will make sure they know they're not alone.
Yeah.
I will go to the people that are, in desperation. I'll make sure they know that there's hope and I'll try my best to be part of that story for them. And that's got nothing to do with God. And
right.
I wouldn't be surprised if someday, I forget if I've had this yet. I don't think I have, but I wouldn't be surprised if someday there's one of those situations and someone says, you know what? I'm a Christian. I'm just guessing you're a Christian. I'm guessing you're helping me because you love Jesus Christ, don't you? And I'll be able to say proudly, no, I'm helping you, but I'm an atheist. But I'm glad to bend over backwards to love on you.
Right.
So it's interesting how that works. Well, if you want to respond to any of that, and then also, I know we went through your story pretty quickly, honestly. So if there's anything else that we skipped over too quickly that you want to bring back up, please feel free. The floor is yours.
Yeah, and I had to learn that. I had to learn how to be a good person again, because so much of what I did was because of Jesus, that when that was no longer my life, like I didn't know how to just be a good human for the sake of being a good human. I didn't know how to not have sex with multiple women because I'm hurting them, or I don't want to have sex with you because I don't want to exchange energy with you, not because I don't want to go to hell, or I don't want to get drunk because I don't want to be out of control. I didn't know how to not lie because I didn't want to go to hell. So I had to literally, and that may sound simple and it may sound basic, but once the training wheels came off for me, I had to learn how to ride the bike on my own. And so that took me several years in and of itself of self-work and therapy and coaching on, okay, you have to live your life, Jamal, from a place of authenticity of how you want to show up in the world. If you want to show up as an asshole, then keep going down this road without the training wheels and the bike wobbling and falling all over the place. But if you actually want to show up as a person of integrity and of impact, then you got to make different choices based on that. And so I had to learn that from scratch, Tim. And that was a process. Like that took me through my second divorce. And that was kind of the catapult that taught me how to now ride the bike without the training wheels. And so that's been a learning process. And, but yeah, that's one of the messages that I teach to everybody is you got to identify, number one, what type of person you want to show up in the world as. And now you got to make choices and decisions based on that. That in and of itself will have you walking in love. That in and of itself will have you helping people, from a place of authenticity, not out of a place of what can I get out of it or who can I please or anything like that.
I love it. I can see why you're a motivational speaker. I can see it. I see it clear. I love it too, because this kind of stuff really does inspire you to be a different person, a better person. And I love thinking about sort of the two sides of the coin here, but, I think more than ever, when you deconvert, you realize your time is short, and if you're going to make an impact for good, you got to do it now. Mm-hmm. And it makes you think, what kind of planet do I want to leave to my kids? And what kind of kids do I want to leave to this planet? And it's like, you want to make a difference and you want to be a better person and you want to shine while you can. And I love that phrase, carpe diem, seize the day.
Yeah.
So the Dead Poet Society kind of stuff. And you want to be more alive than ever. And it's cool though, because even though you can kind of look back and say, so much wasted time, so much wasted energy and focus, like money, it could have just been used so differently. At the same time, I do sometimes, like, I know that there's nothing in the universe is like the universe conspired to bring you to this point. I know it's not real, but you almost have to like pretend that way and be like, look, this is where you are. I know you're not here for a purpose, but you say it to yourself anyway if it makes you feel good. You're here for a purpose.
Yeah.
Make your life count
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you what, when you take that power back and say, I can truly help this planet, I have ways to make people who are feeling empty and lost and people who are living in lies, I can make a difference. It builds you up and it inspires you so much. You just want to be a game changer for people. And I love the idea. Someone else said this. I wish I thought of it. I can't take any credit for it, but somebody said once, your story, like your story of survival, might be someone else's, or sorry, your story might become someone else's survival manual.
Yeah.
And I love that because you never know. You never know what person's going to listen to me or you or some next person. Somehow the vibe is going to get through with certain people to certain people. Like if they made it, and our story is kind of a line here. If they made it, I'm close enough to their story. I bet I can make it too.
Absolutely.
And it's so cool. It's such a cool journey. And I definitely, if I could turn back time, I would do some things differently and I would undo the past in some ways. But in another sense, it's like, you can't do that. So what are you going to do with the time you got now? And it's really cool when you stop sort of licking your wounds. We all get to the bottom of the barrel, but you don't have to lick the splinters when you get there. Just, say, it is what it is. But from this point on, I'm in control. I'm the master of my fate as much as possible. Absolutely. And I will make a difference in this world.
Yep. No doubt. I'm right there with you, man. Right there with you.
So what else is on your mind today? I know, again, you're probably one of the fastest interviews I've ever done. You definitely know how to keep the points moving.
Yeah.
What else is on your heart today? Anything else that you're thinking about?
No, I mean, the big thing for me is I just want people to know they can be free, that they're okay as they are. There's freedom on the other side of religion. If there's other people out there that are struggling on the fence about, scared to leave, you're okay to leave. Your life will actually grow and be a lot more fruitful when those chains are broken, when you're out of the bondage of religion, when you're not living with the cloud of fear of going to this place that was created and you had no choice to even be born, but yet it was created for you, because of God's failed earth project. When you get out of that mythology and that bondage, life becomes so much more abundant, so much more open. There's so much, more impact that you can make, because now you're making an impact and you're interacting with people out of a place of authenticity, not trying to win them over, not trying to get something from them. But you can truly live a life of authenticity and fruitfulness on the other side of religion.
I love it. Beautiful thoughts. I was just going to add one thing that you made me think of with something you said a minute ago. It's amazing when you look at the Old Testament, the Bible really is just another long story that's an example of the failure of that God. Like if he were real.
Yeah.
So he creates the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve are his master plan, and it fails. And then he goes through all these other people. Finally, it's like, let's just get these people to the promised land, and they fail, and they have to wander around in the desert for 40 years. And they finally get there and they do the conquest, but they keep messing up and they fail again. And they finally take over. There's a kingdom. And then it falls apart and they have to go be taken over to these foreign lands. And then eventually they finally get back and they're restored. But the Romans are there and like, God just can't do it. And finally it's like, we get to 70 AD and the whole temple's destroyed. It's like, your God, if you are real, it's just one long story of like hundreds of failures.
Failures.
And it's amazing once you see it, it's like so many other things. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like, in the story it's painted all the humans failed. Like, no, the God failed. The God character failed.
Right. Absolutely.
Thankfully, he's just a literary character.
And then created a world where he knew, and then I actually had this conversation once with my brother, and this is how they weasel out of that, whatever denomination they're in. I think they're Pentecostal. But I'm like, tell me how this makes, I told him, I said, tell me how this makes sense. So you have this God who created this world and created these people, didn't give them a choice to be here, but he knew ahead of time that the majority of the people he created were going to go to hell. Does that make, like, why would he do that knowing that ahead of time? And so he hit me with, well, God isn't all knowing. He didn't know ahead of time that they were going to do that. He gave them free will and he didn't know what they were going to choose. And I'm like, wow. And that was new to me. Like, I didn't know there was a sect of Christianity that actually believe that was their God cop out. They actually believed God wasn't all knowing, that he's God, but he created people and he was as shocked at their decisions as we are.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
like, come on.
It does sound ridiculous, but I will admit that was sort of my journey of cognitive dissonance for a while, where mine was under Calvinism's umbrella. But the idea being that, you can justify all this stuff. The only thing that really got me out, and I'm not saying everyone needs to take this route is the only way out. There's a lot of ways to do it, but the only thing that really shook me up enough was to study the mythology. And I sort of pulled apart the mythology behind the Gospels. And I was like, oh shit, they're copying from all over the place. And of course, even just the bigger question of like, which Gospels should we look at? There's there's at least 50 or 60 that we know, but probably there were hundreds originally.
Right.
So it's like, which ones? And the ones that we got, we don't even know who wrote them. And it's just, that's a big deal in itself. But if you assume for sake of argument, those are the right ones, you realize they're copying from other mythologies and other Greco-Roman mystery cults. So I was like, all right, well, at least like the Yahweh character, God, like God's solid. And then you go back and you're like, oh shit. Like Yahweh was originally the son of Elyon and Asherah, one of like many sons. Right. And then they switched it and merged them. And then Yahweh had Asherah as his wife, and then they took her away. It's like, oh, wait a second. That's just another Canaanite pantheon god. Demigod at that. And it just, once you pull apart Jesus' mythology and Yahweh's mythology, all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I've been the sucker in the room. I have been the sucker in the room. Yeah.
What did it for me too, one of the things was just the translations of the New Testament, how, Jesus spoke Aramaic and then they translated it in Greek and now we have it in English. And we're supposed to believe there was nothing that lost in translation. And so I actually had that conversation with my daughter once. I'm like, baby, that would be like, hey, 30 years after daddy dies, somebody translates our conversation that we're having today in Spanish. And then they're actually going to print it in French. And you mean to tell me they're not going to mess up any of this conversation that you and I are having today?
Yeah. But French, like hundreds and hundreds of years later.
Right. Yeah.
It is.
Just, crazy.
And no idea of the chain of custody of who's had the documents and who's changed them. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you escaped. I mean, honestly, just that's always the big point to me, is like, I'm so glad you got out.
Absolutely.
And
Rob.
I love your power. I love your vibe. Please keep at it. We need voices like yours in the community. And when the time's right for the YouTube channel, let me know. We'll put you on blast and get you in everybody's vision here. But thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you.
Was there any final words for us today?
No, just be free. Be free. There's life on the other side, y'all.
I love it. Love it. Good stuff. Well, everyone, we've been speaking with Jamal Luke. Jamal, thank you so much. Great to hear your story. Great to get to know you. And I definitely want to do it again sometime. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.